In this segment, we're going to take a look at a few issues that always poll at the top when it comes to voter concerns. I'm talking about taxes, the economy, and also health care. But President Trump's policies, they are not helping his base when it comes to those things. And let's start off with taxes. Trump tax cuts, they're now 2 years in, and they may be helping some folks, but not the folks that were promised the biggest bang for the buck. Here's the president when he announced them.
These massive tax cuts will be rocket fuel. Little rocket man, rocket fuel for the American economy.
And he said, hey, you could see economic growth consequently up to 6% thanks to the cuts. Now, the economy's doing good, but we haven't come close to that number. In fact, the economy, it's growing at a rate less than half of that. Plus, as a consequence of raising spending and also cutting taxes, the thing called deficits happen, and they're piling up in a big way, consequentially because of that same tax plan. Plus, the wealthiest Americans, they're getting the most bang for their buck out of this. And don't trust me, take a look at this chart. It tells the story. The top 5% of income earners are getting more than half of the total benefits. And the less you make, the less you're helped. Then we get to health care. A recent court ruling, it is putting Obamacare in real jeopardy as it's struck an essential part of the Affordable Care Act. Now, the case, it's not over, and it won't be for a while, but it certainly is causing angst and uncertainty for millions of people. If it's thrown out, 17 million Americans could lose their insurance, and 50 million people with pre-existing conditions could also be impacted. But the president, he still wants to get rid of it, even though it will hurt countless Trump voters in the process. Rick Ungar knows healthcare better than anybody when it comes to this. He joins us now. He's the host of the nationally syndicated radio program, The Rick Ungar Show. All right, Rick, I know when I talk about healthcare and court decisions, the eyes start to glaze over. But they shouldn't, especially if you're not among the best in this country in terms of how you're doing on the economic scale. Talk about what the case that was recently decided that's now going to go up the food chain through the courts, what it said, and if the high court upholds it eventually, if it gets to them, what that could mean.
It's a little complicated, but we'll try and break it down for you. Some people will recall that when Obamacare originally went to the Supreme Court, it was Justice Roberts who saved Obamacare by suggesting that even though an individual mandate might be unconstitutional, this was different because, in effect, because you paid a penalty, then it was a tax, and the federal government has the taxing authority. Therefore, he upheld that part of Obamacare and upheld the whole law. After they finally came up with something, then what happened was they did away in the 2017 tax law, which we're going to talk about some other issues, they did away with the penalty in the individual mandate. So according to the law, you still had to buy health insurance, but if you didn't do it, there was zero penalty. So somebody brings a lawsuit, actually it was the Attorney General of the state of Texas with some other attorney generals. They bring a lawsuit in federal court and they go, wait a second. The reason Obamacare was held to be constitutional was because of that tax. Well, now that tax is gone. Therefore, the individual mandate cannot be considered constitutional. Not only did the federal court judge, the district court judge, agree with that argument, but he actually struck down the entire law, saying that once you got rid of the individual mandate, you couldn't sever the rest of it or save the rest of it. That's what went up to the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. We heard from them last week. And Rich, they kind of chickened out, because they agreed with the lower court saying, yeah, the individual mandate, now there's no tax to justify it. No, that's no good. That's unconstitutional. But as to whether or not it damages in any way the remainder of Obamacare, rather than rule on it, they sent it back to the lower court to develop more facts. I'm putting that in quotes. What that is saying is the Fifth Circuit didn't want to be the court to say, we are going to throw those 17 million people off of their health insurance.
You know, we talk about the taxes, and 2 years in to where we are with the tax cuts, who they've impacted, et cetera. Again, it's funny, deficits and debt used to be the boogeyman for the GOP not that many years ago. Now it's never mind. But this comes back to really when I heard the president in Michigan going after Dingell and the rest. And I said to myself, Listen, there's got to be auto workers in that crowd. If anybody fought for them, it sure wasn't the guy on the stage that night. It was Dingell and the whole Dingell clan, let alone the previous administration, who rescued the auto industry after the '08 collapse. This idea of not voting in your self-interest, I think Exhibit A is the tax cuts. I mean, they're giving guys that don't need the break the biggest breaks out of it. They don't even disguise it. And the people that could use help, let alone people I'm sure they know that are on food stamps or whatever, going to have that yanked out, they're still cheering the guy who's doing it. I know this is an age-old, quandary, but it always boggles the mind. You don't have to connect that many P's here to realize this guy's rooting for your boss. He's not rooting for you, but yet they give him a standing O. Why?
Why? I'll tell you what, rather than answer the question, Rich, as to why, because who can possibly understand it, I am going to tell you about something that might have an impact on this. Starting next year, the Commerce Department is going to experiment with something that I've been clamoring for this for years, so have many others. Rather than just give us the GDP number, where we look at it and go, oh, okay, we're doing pretty well, it never tells you who's doing pretty well. So yeah, you may have a GDP up to as high as 2.8% this quarter or whatever, but it doesn't say who's benefiting from that. Well, this new experiment is going to break the GDP down and tell you where the benefits are going. I think that is going to have a dramatic change on how people view this when they look at where they sit in the economy and they go, wait a minute. Most of this great growth, it's not going to me. It's going to the person I work for, or it's going to the wealthy people. But right now, they don't know it. They don't, you can't feel, see, and touch a GDP number. So they look at it and go, well, I guess we're doing better, so I guess I'm doing better too. I guess I'm doing a little better anyhow. And they don't realize that maybe they're making, an extra 70 cents an hour compared to where we were 5, 6, 7 years ago. But the boss, he's making a whole lot more than that.
All right, everybody, when we come back, what will it take to actually beat Trump next November? Well, we would have thought after everything he's done in 3 years, not a lot. Well, think again here. People, though, have an idea here, and it's nothing to do with policies. It's about the feel. We'll talk about that approach after this.